You know, when I was sitting there watching the previous speakers, I saw some of the gentlemen wiping their faces with handkerchiefs. And I thought, wow, it must be hot up there. I wonder what will happen when I come up here. So if I start sweating, somebody be ready to throw me a handkerchief. It's been wonderful, listening to all the fantastic and amazing speakers. I have been really, really amazed. And I thank you. I'm glad to be here. When I arrived here this morning, I overheard a couple, arguing outside about Nigeria. Nigeria is great, Nigeria is not great. And after listening to some of the speakers today, I feel compelled to ask, is Nigeria a great country? Okay, I can see some people nodding and some scratching their heads. Well, if we cannot answer that question without shuffling our feet and being confused, it's time to ask ourselves what we are bringing to the table to ensure that we become what we can be. That call has been made by several people today, and I think our response is urgent and it has to be given now. A forum like this is a great opportunity to ask ourselves, why are we the way we are? Why do we do the things we do? To re-examine our country and our situations. I believe that it's important to ask that, because if you don't, then you may never know where you're going from where you are. My sister told me a story. My sister told me she recently moved to a nice neighborhood in Uyo where she has access to everything. Shortly after she moved into this neighborhood, there was a major electrical fault and there was no light for several days. Eventually, she also ran out of water. Being new in this neighborhood, she didn't know how to get water. And for a while, the boreholes they had, the generator could not run the borehole. So running out of water, she was just confused. Anyway, what happened was, she found out that 4 days into the calamity, and I call it a calamity because for people like my sister, being without water for 4 days is a major crisis. Never mind that millions of people all over the world live without water, and they get by. For her, it's a major crisis. Shortly after she moved in, she woke up one night to find that power had been restored and the taps were running. My sister woke up early in the morning to fetch water, filled every single thing in her house with water. 4 a.m. she went back to bed. The next morning, she found out she could not take a bath because the bathtub, the buckets, every single thing in the house was filled with water. She couldn't even boil an egg because her pots and pans, kettles, everything was filled with water. And the strange thing was, even though the tap, there was running water, clean water, she could not imagine throwing away a drop of this water. She said to me, I stood there in my kitchen holding this egg that I could not boil, surrounded by all this water that I could not throw out. And suddenly, I understood why people steal vulgar sums of money. She said to me, it is fear. Fear of being without. Fear of going back where they're coming from. Fear of becoming insignificant. Today I'm asking the question, why are we afraid? I ask that question because I think at the bottom of our problems is a deep-seated fear that we're barely aware of. Fear that is so subtle we mistake it for caution. Why are we afraid? I absolutely agree with my sister. I thought to myself, wow, if it's true that it's fear that drives what we see around us, because if we talk about corruption and we never ask, why does this happen? What is fueling the level of greed that we see around us? It means that even if you set up institutions to catch thieves, without dealing with the cesspool of fear that produces these thieves, each time you take out one thief, another will just be produced to take that place, and the cycle continues. I work with young people at STLC, and I have come to believe that indeed we are afraid. Young Nigerians are afraid. They are afraid of tribes and cultures and religions that they don't understand. They are afraid that the cake will all be eaten before they get there. The question is, why this fear? Now, let's back up a little and ask. Psychologists tell us that the first few years of life of any individual impacts what happens in the future, impacts what that adult becomes. And I thought to myself, could we also assert that the first few years in the life of a country impact the adult nation that country becomes? What would I find if I were to delve into the history of Nigeria? Would I find that history is not history for history's sake, but history directly impacts what happens in the future? I decided to find out. Unfortunately, history is not one of my favorite subjects. I don't like history. A couple of weeks ago, my 7-year-old daughter had to do an assignment to identify all the Nigerians on the Naira notes. Now, my husband and I helped her to do this assignment. And let me ask, who is on the 10 Naira notes? Who? You know your money. Okay, great. So as we helped her do this assignment, apart from just knowing who is on the money, we had to find out one fun fact about all these individuals so she can make a presentation in class. In the process of finding this out, I was dismayed and embarrassed to find that I knew very little about the origins, about the history of Nigeria. I was embarrassed to find out that I knew very little about our past leaders. It got to a point where my daughter was like, "Mommy, you two, you don't know?" So I decided to find out. And what I did find out was that Nigeria has always been divided along tribal lines. I bring this up because I mentioned the issues that young people deal with, issues of tribe. Why are people afraid of people from different tribes? This fear of tribes, since we've always been divided along tribal lines, it affects everything we do. It colors everything we do with ethnic hues. And we find that when we come together as Nigeria, it looks like we don't understand the rules by which others are working. And so we retreat to the safety of our little tribes. A young lady at one of our leadership camps told us a story that illustrates this point. She had sent in a proposal for close to a year. She just couldn't get this proposal approved until the PA to the minister said, "You know what, do something to your name." So she told the group that she inserted a middle name that she hardly uses, which reflected with the minister's tribe. And within a week of doing that, that proposal was approved. It wasn't just approved and she got funding, but the minister sent a rep to the opening ceremony. I don't know why I was surprised by this story, but the impact this had on this young lady was to give her a fear that she may never succeed at anything except someone from her tribe is directly involved in that process. And that's a dangerous mindset to create for a young person. What can we do about it? We agree that tribe is a major issue with Nigeria. Why don't we do something about it? I have come up with what I think is a brilliant idea. What if every Nigerian was mandated to take a second name from another tribe of their choice? Would you be willing to take another name from another tribe if you knew that in 20 years' time, it would be practically impossible for people to tell where you come from simply by reading your name? Would you be willing to do that? With the right incentive, would we be willing to give every newborn child a name that has dual tribal identities? This would not stop anyone from going home to celebrate their New Yam Festival or their Orayon Festival or their Gungu Festival. It would just make it much more difficult for people to take you out of a list simply by looking at your name. And I think with time, if we had names like Akpan Yusuf Abiola, Amina Nkechi Ogbadu, Danladi Obina, as Nigerian names, not as Igbo names or Hausa names or Yoruba names, just Nigerian names. You look at these names and what you think of is, this is a Nigerian name. I think with time, the multiplication effect will be so much that we'll just stop caring, and then we'll realize that it wasn't so important after all. I found out that another thing our young people are afraid of is God. If you look at our landscape, you will agree with me that we are a very religious society. But it seems to me that our fear of God stands smack between between us and our ability to do the right thing. How else can you explain that, given the choice, we constantly tend to choose what is negative over what is positive? Let me tell you something. A friend of mine, and I asked her permission to tell this story, shared this with me. Someone in her organization did something downright evil. This woman removed vital documents from people's files, costing them training and promotion opportunities. As a matter of fact, one of the gentlemen that was affected, in the process of trying to retrieve these documents, got involved in an accident that people lost life, and he lost his left hand. My friend was horrified, suitably horrified, but obviously not horrified enough to step up with the truth. When I asked her why she wasn't speaking up, she said, because of God. It turned out, she said, well, this woman is a widow. If I speak up, she will lose her job, and then she'll lose her house, won't be able to take care of her kids, won't be able to pay her rent, and she didn't want that on her conscience. So, sweet silence. I know a man who would not speak up, who would not testify, a woman who would not testify against a man who was molesting her 6-year-old daughter because of God. When careless drivers ram into us because they were speaking on the phone, costing us thousands of naira in damage, we let them get away with it because of God. If we see two people arguing over an injury, we intervene by persuading the injured partner to let the matter go because of God, without insisting that the person who has caused harm make up in some form or the other. And by doing this, we consistently let people get away without taking responsibilities for their actions. And you will agree with me that that permeates everything we do. Right now, we don't ask our leaders, our politicians, to take responsibilities for anything that goes on. What is it about God that prevents us from doing our civic duties? Why is our fear of God not inspiring us to be courageous, to speak the truth, to stand for justice? Why does it manifest in half-truths and lies and covering up that which is evil? Have you ever imagined what would have happened if Rosa Parks were a God-fearing Nigerian? She would have given up that seat. And why? Thank you. You know your scriptures. Because of God. I think we don't have the fear of God. I suspect we are afraid of God. And the two are not the same. I think they're as far apart as light is from darkness. Why are we afraid? Going back to the precedent I set earlier, that maybe the origins impact the future, I thought, could it be that maybe the African traditional religion that we started with, where we feared our deities, you either made the sacrifice or you became the sacrifice. Could that be responsible that when we were introduced to the new religions, we transferred those fears to the new deity? Being afraid of God is not the solution. The very fact that we are afraid of God is a pointer to our faulty beliefs, and I think that should send a strong message to our religious leaders. Finally, I want to talk about another fear that we have. Fear of people. We are afraid. Now, I think respect is overrated. And when I say this, I am not in any way saying that we should not respect. Respect is vital in every human relationship. But I think we haven't learned the skills to engage effectively with people of different economic strata, people older than us, or people are bosses and all that. The very act of kneeling down and prostrating and lying in the dust to greet people, while a beautiful cultural expression, I think it does something to the psyche. I think it creates a subservient mentality, and we find it difficult to give feedback when it is necessary. We are raised to say yes sir, yes ma, in good times and in bad. Now, Respect is important. I'm not saying lose our respect for people, lose our beautiful cultural heritage. I'm just saying when it crosses the boundary to inordinate human worship, masquerading as respect, that must be challenged. We are a people afraid. We are afraid of our neighbors, afraid of our bosses, afraid of the minister, afraid of the senators, afraid of poverty, afraid of being insignificant, afraid of God. Fear is the greatest self-inflicted bondage that anyone can have. And as long as you are bound by the shackles of fear, you can never speak about freedom. And as a country, we pay lip service to freedom if we are enmeshed in deep-seated fears of one another. What do we do about this? We'll go back to leadership. We always fall back on leadership. I think we need imaginative leaders who can recognize that these fears exist and do everything possible to build trust and confidence. Someone has spoken about that in the previous sessions. We need to rebuild confidence. We need to rebuild trust among the populace. At STLC, what we do is to desensitize young people from all of these fears by providing them with a safe environment where they can engage with each other across boundaries. We help them to examine their identities, who they are as individuals, as community members, as global members of the global society, what their rights are and what their responsibilities are. We help them to clarify their values because we think that right now our values are absolutely skewed. We help young people to begin to clarify those values. We help them, we give them the skills to give effective feedback so that they're able to talk to, whether it's their bosses or their daddies or someone older or more prosperous than them. They're able to give feedback in a manner that is effective, it's honest, and it's okay. Above all, we tell them that it's okay to give a feedback and it's okay to speak up. We even tell them that they should not worry. The national cake will not all be eaten before they get there. We help them to identify their mental models, the fears they have, the limitations they have, and we give them practical skills to help them overcome those limitations. Is Nigeria a great country? I like to say she can be. After all has been said and done, I think Nigeria can be a great country. At STLC, we say imagine the possibilities. I prefer that after all is said and done, we imagine what is possible for our country. If we all bring something to the table, just as much to the table as we're taking away, no more, no less, I believe that sooner or later we'll find out that there's enough for everybody and there's no need to be afraid. Thank you very much.